Today, we're diving into a series of events that really seem to defy all scientific explanation. These are events at the very heart of the Catholic faith, known as Eucharistic miracles. We're talking about moments where, according to believers, the divine steps in a very real and sometimes pretty startling way. So, what's really going on in these accounts? Let's dig in. Okay, first things first. To really get what these stories are about, you have to understand a core Catholic concept called transubstantiation. Now, this isn't just saying the bread and wine are symbols. Nope. This is the belief that they actually fundamentally become the body and blood of Christ. And that belief, well, it's the absolute key that unlocks why these events are considered so profound. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the basics of the Eucharist and these miracles. Then we're going to travel way back to some ancient wonders. After that, we'll see how one of these events led to a major feast day. Then we'll jump to the modern era to see how science has gotten involved. And finally, we'll wrap up with the big question of faith. Right, so what's the point of these miracles anyway? For believers, these aren't just random, weird things happening. They're seen as these powerful, divine thumbs-ups, direct affirmations of that doctrine we just talked about, transubstantiation. They're like a tangible peek behind the spiritual curtain. But what's so fascinating is where so many of these stories start. It's not with unshakable faith, it's actually the complete opposite. A ton of these accounts begin with a priest, right in the middle of Mass, who is just wrestling with a huge crisis of belief. And it's in that very human moment of doubt that something extraordinary is set to happen. So, let's see this whole doubt gets answered thing in action. We're going to head back in time now to look at two of the oldest and most famous examples, events that really set the stage for everything that followed. And we are going way back for these first two. Our first stop is 8th century Italy, in a small town called Lanciano. Then we'll fast forward almost 400 years to see a strangely similar event unfold in Laon, France. Okay, so picture this. Lanciano, Italy. All the way back in the 8th century. A priest is up at the altar celebrating Mass, but as he's saying the words of consecration, his mind is just filled with doubt about the real presence. And right at that moment, the consecrated host he was holding supposedly transformed right there in his hands into visible flesh and blood. Now, let's jump forward 1,200 years. In 1970, scientists got their hands on these ancient relics, and what they found was, well, it was stunning. The flesh was identified as human heart tissue, cardiac muscle to be specific. The blood was human, type AB. For believers, this was an incredible moment. Here was modern science seemingly confirming an ancient miracle. And we see this exact same theme play out again in Lyon, France in 1196. Another priest struggling with his faith during Mass reportedly sees the host begin to bleed, staining the altar cloth. It was a powerful event that reinforced the doctrine for that whole region. Okay, so our next miracle is a big one. I mean, this event was so influential that it literally created a brand new feast day on the calendar for the entire Catholic Church. So it's 1263 in Bolsena, Italy. A traveling priest is celebrating Mass, and you guessed it, he's having major doubts. And just like before, the host starts to bleed, dripping onto the altar cloth. But this time, that miraculous cloth gets taken directly to the Pope himself, Urban IV. He was so moved by it that he declared it a sign from God and created the Feast of Corpus Christi, which is still celebrated all over the world today. But this stuff isn't just ancient history. Let's jump to our own time, to a couple of very recent cases that were investigated not just by the Church, but with modern, high-tech forensic methods. Okay, look at how eerily similar these two modern cases are. On the left, we've got Sokolka, Poland, in 2008. On the right, Buenos Aires back in 1996. In both situations, a consecrated host was accidentally dropped. Standard practice is to place it in water to dissolve, but in both cases, it didn't dissolve. Instead, it changed into a fleshy substance that scientific analysis later concluded was, get this, human heart tissue. And here's a detail that gives the Buenos Aires stories some serious weight. The whole official investigation was overseen by the local archbishop, a man named Jorge Bergoglio, who you might know better today as Pope Francis. Yep, he was the one who authorized the scientific studies and made those startling results public back in 2006. So after looking at all these cases spanning more than 1,000 years of history, what's the ultimate takeaway? For believers, what does it all mean? What's the big picture here? All right, so let's just recap the big points. These miracles are seen as God's way of confirming a core belief. That story of doubt answered comes up again and again. We've seen how modern science has played a huge role in investigating these claims, often coming back with incredible findings, like human heart tissue. And of course, every single one of these places, from Lanciano to Sokolka, is now a major pilgrimage site, drawing people from all over the world. And all of this really leaves us with one big question to chew on. In our modern world, a world that relies so heavily on scientific proof and what we can explain, what role do events like these, events that seem to defy all explanation, play in a person's faith? It's a question that gets right to the heart of that tension between what we can prove and what we choose to believe.